Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
2, 1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower clear.
But other sightings apparently were taken more seriously.
And one in particular, an incident called the Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell. This was in 1980, shortly after Christmas, when a few American airmen who were stationed in the UK reported seeing a UFO.
A huge, solid, diamond-shaped object they described as 100 foot long, hovering silently in the sky above them.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
American public and global public finally understands UFOs are real. This is a technology that is so far beyond anything that we have.
Reportedly appear to exhibit unusual flight characteristics, appear to demonstrate advanced technology.
Arrow is the culmination of decades of DoD, intelligence community, and congressionally directed efforts to successfully resolve UAP encountered first and foremost by U.S. military.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Disclosure Team. I'm your host, Vinny Adams. The following is an interview with Jim Garrison. Jim is on the board of directors for Ubiquity University. He is also the director of the Washington, D.C. office for the New Paradigm Institute. If you enjoy this content, please take a second to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment down below, and share it with your friends. I really do appreciate all of the continued support. Unfortunately, I didn't realize until after this interview was recorded that it wasn't picking up my main microphone. It was picking up my webcam microphone. It's not too bad, but it's not how I usually do it. So I apologize if any of you notice a slight drop in my quality. I hope you enjoy this interview with Jim Garrison. So Jim, thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute honor to have you here. How are you today?
Doing very well, thank you.
Excellent. Jim, before we get into kind of the main interview, I just wondered if you would give us kind of a background on yourself, if you don't mind.
I'm the director of the Washington office of the New Paradigm Institute, which is working exclusively on UFO, UAP disclosure issues, both here where I'm situated in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. Congress and government, but also more broadly, setting up citizens for disclosure groups around the United States and different parts of the world, and working on a variety of both political and societal levels to ensure further UAP disclosure. My background is in academia. I'm the president of Ubiquity University. I also convene a daily broadcast called Humanity Rising, and I have a long history of social and political activism.
That's fantastic. I've been following your work very closely recently, and I've also noticed that through the Ubiquity University, in partnership with the New Paradigm Institute, you've actually created the world's first certificate and academic degree program in extraterrestrial studies, which is fantastic. If you don't mind, could you kind of give us a bit of an overview on what that entails?
Sure. You know, if you think about it, the entire world is now being told by the US government, after nearly 80 years of secrecy, classification, and repression of all kinds about the UFO issue, that they exist, that extraterrestrial aircraft have been retrieved, extraterrestrial biologic entities, as they're called, also have been retrieved. And so humanity is now entering into its ET moment. And we all have to take that in. That was what was speculation and possibility is now a fact. So we are not alone. Extraterrestrials not only exist, they've been on planet Earth for some time, and there's been evidence of sustained contact. So in effect, humanity is entering into its ET moment, possibly the most momentous occasion in the entire history of the human species, certainly since the coming of fire. This is in some ways the second coming of fire. So what people are going to want to know are a series of questions answered. What are the facts? What are the history? What is the law? What's the technology? Who are these beings? How do we communicate with them? So what the New Paradigm Institute has done is partnered with Ubiquity University to produce the first ever training program with 2 certificates. One produced by the New Paradigm Institute on the history, law, politics, and technology of the UFO, UAP domain, UAP meaning unidentified anomalous phenomena. And then what Ubiquity is doing is another certificate on ET awareness and communication. Who are they? How do we communicate with them? And together you take these 2 certificates of 8 courses apiece. Then when you finish those, you can roll those into Ubiquity and write a dissertation for a master's or PhD degree in extraterrestrial studies. And for any information, you can go to ubiquityuniversity.org, or you can go to newparadigminstitute.org. And on both websites, you can get information for how you can take the certificates. Our first course is February 29th with Danny Sheehan, who has been active in the UFO, UAP domain since the late 1970s. And then he'll be offering 2 courses in history, law, politics of UFOs. And then Richard Dolan, the great historian of UFOs in the national security state, will be offering 2 more courses. And then we'll begin to offer a range of courses in remote viewing and mental telepathy for how people can train themselves for contact with the extraterrestrials. They've been here in myriad ways over the last 75, 80 years, all over the world, to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. They're here. They want to help. And we need to be able to contact them outside of our governments so that citizens engage in the requisite communication with the extraterrestrials. Our governments are going to just bungle it, as they have for 75 years. So we, the people, need to establish a sort of an Earth diplomacy corps for the ETs. And so it's a very exciting program that we're developing. And alongside that, we're about ready to launch the Citizens for Disclosure for groups all over the world that will start to come together, educate themselves, take the training, and then work locally, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Russia, China, India, South Africa, Brazil, wherever you are in the world, your government knows something about ETs that they're not telling you. And it's time that they did. So it's a very exciting moment as humanity enters its ET moment. And the New Paradigm Institute and Ubiquity University are very privileged, actually, to be offering the training programs and degree programs for people globally that want to find out more.
That's fantastic. And I will make sure that I pop the relevant links in the description of this video so people can certainly go and take a look for themselves. I think it's fascinating and wonderful. So thank you for that. So let's go into a little bit more about disclosure. If you don't mind, in your opinion, what impact would widespread disclosure of the UAP information have on society?
I think it'll be immense. And that's one reason why they've held it so secretly. Think about it just for a moment. Since our origin, hundreds of thousands of years ago, we've basically looked sideways and we've looked down as a species, competing with each other, dominating nature, doing everything we can in our groups to gain supremacy one way or another. And most of our major religions have told us that the humanity is the apex of creation. And for many thousands of years that the planet Earth was the center of the entire cosmos. And then about 500 years ago, Copernicus showed us that that wasn't actually the case, that the Earth revolves around the sun, and the sun is a minor star in a minor galaxy. But we still thought, well, that may be, but humans are still the apex of creation. And now we're having our second Copernican revolution, and we're realizing that not only are we not alone, but these alien beings are coming to planet Earth using technology that our current physics has no way of explaining. Humanity is nowhere near understanding how the universe works. Our physics today with Einstein and everybody that's done quantum mechanics is as primitive to the physics being used by alien civilizations to get here as Stone Age tools were 10,000 years ago in the jungle. We'll look back on this period as a very primitive, almost infantile way that we humans went through as we were led into deeper and deeper understandings of who we are. One measure of how out of touch we are, how ignorant we are, is that we keep killing each other. Look what Israel's doing in Gaza. It's committing genocide against completely innocent, defenseless people all over the world. Conflict, violence, destruction, not only to each other, but to the environment. In fact, we've so egregiously violated every natural norm and natural law and ethics, we're about ready to destroy ourselves. That's what's being predicted by the climate scientists, by indigenous prophecies. That's how out of touch humanity is in our sophisticated modernity with big cities and computers and AI and all kinds of iPhones and Google Docs. So once we take in that we are not alone and we're being now challenged and communicated to by very advanced civilizations, we're going to have to radically rethink who we are and how we relate to the larger ecosystem, or we will not survive our ET moment. And this is a very important point, Vinny. If you look at all the people over the last 75 years, all over the world, that have reported that they have been in communication of one kind or another with the extraterrestrials. What they say, most of the extraterrestrials say to them is, stop killing each other. Yeah. Stop destroying the planet. Come back into alignment because you've become a virus. So the impact and the implications of our ET moment is that humanity finally has to come into a whole new awareness and consciousness, a whole new paradigm. And that new paradigm of nonviolence to each other and a synergistic relationship with the larger ecosystem is the gateway, the price, if you will, to us being able to be worthy of the kind of extraterrestrial contact and communication and interactivity that we're now being invited by the heavens, as it were, as they're opening up to us and inviting us to look up.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of push or a lot of focus on the government aspect of things in the last 5 years or so. And I know it's been tried before, but it seems like that this time, dare I say, it may be different. But so what role or what legislative or policy changes do you believe are necessary to kind of advance the UAP disclosure efforts when it comes to the government?
Well, let's look at the history just for a moment, the recent history, because I think it gives us an indication of what we've accomplished, the forces that are still arrayed against us, and therefore what we have to do. It was really only in 2017 when the New York Times published on the front page for the first time in history that the US government had information about UFOs. Up to that point, they denied that they had anything because they said UFOs don't even exist. That's how closely held this secret has been. It's been the most closely held secret in history, even more secret than nuclear weapons technologies. Nuclear weapons technology, we don't know how to build them, but we know that they exist. With UFOs, they wouldn't admit that they even existed until 2017. The New York Times, the most prestigious newspaper, certainly in the United States, said that they do. That started a process in Congress that culminated in a series of hearings, which the last of which was held last July 26, 2023, when several people from the intelligence and military community, including David Grush, who is one of the very senior intelligence officials who knew a lot about the UFO, UAP domain, he testified, public hearing, sworn testimony, that yes, the US government has retrieved non-human technology and retrieved non-human intelligences, what he called biologics. And that sent shockwaves all around the world. And a week later, Senator Schumer, majority leader of the US Senate, submitted an amendment called the UAP Disclosure Act, where it said that the US government finally needed to admit that UAP exist and that there needs to be a controlled process of disclosure into the public domain, and that the Congress needed the power of eminent domain and subpoena power to compel the other agencies of the government, some 38 agencies in the military and intelligence and energy sector and the commercial sector, including defense corporations like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Radiance Technology, et cetera, Northrop Grumman, the defense contractors. They have a lot of this information because that's how this whole thing originated and was kept secret. And that was the origin of the military industrial complex, was around the UFO, nuclear weapons issues, where the government and private corporations began to work together to produce nuclear weapons, but also to engage in reverse engineering of the alien craft and the alien bodies that had been retrieved. So the Congress was completely kept out of that loop. And so in 2017, when all of a sudden the cat was out of the bag and it was public awareness that the government had this information, the Congress stepped in as the legislative branch. And in the amendment that Senator Schumer and then Senator Round and a bipartisan group of senators, it was passed unanimously out of the Senate Intelligence Committee in July, and it was sent over to the House of Representatives. And then the empire struck back. And the defense community, the intelligence community, and in particular, the defense contractors who have this information and have the intellectual property, they have no interest in giving this up. Because can you imagine if you had ET technology that comes from 1 million years into the future, and the power and the profits that you would be able to garner if you could crack the code? There's a lot at stake in this. So they came back, and make a long story very short, they eviscerated the Schumer Amendment. And what finally was passed on the 14th and 15th of December in the Senate and then in the House was the Unidentified Anomalous Collection Act as part of the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, which gives the U.S. military all the money that it needs to fight all the wars in which the United States is engaged for 2024. The UA Records Collection Act was embedded in that. It stripped out all the executive functions, no subpoena power, no eminent domain. It said you just have to turn the information over to the National Archives, but if you don't want to, for any kind of national security reasons, you don't have to. But what had to pass, did pass, signed into law on December 22nd by President Joe Biden, that the U.S. government is now on record stating that technologies of unknown origin, non-human technologies, and non-human intelligences exist, and all the information needs to be turned over to the National Archives with the intent of disseminating everything into the public domain. And they have till October 2023 to begin the process of turning over this information. So what's happening, to the answer to your question, what needs to happen next, what's already happening is the US Senate is now drafting new legislation to put more executive power to the Congress so they can compel the executive branch and the private sector corporations to turn over this information. So there's now a struggle within the US government for the information, and the intent by Congress, which according to the Supreme Court is the government of the United States. The president, the executive branch, just executes the law. The judicial branch judges whether the law is kosher, but it's the legislative branch that is the government because they pass the laws and they are chosen by the people. So there's now the formation of what they call a UAP caucus in the Congress, and there's new legislation. There's hearings that are out there, and the New Paradigm Institute has been issuing calls to action for people all over the United States to get involved in writing your congressional representative, your senator, to call for hearings on the UAP disclosure issue. The Citizens for Democracy, Citizens for Disclosure groups that New Paradigm is setting up are going to try to make the UAP disclosure issue an election issue for 2024. And we're encouraging citizens for disclosure groups to form in other countries, because I guarantee you, wherever you are, your government is hiding information just like the US government is. And not unless and until the citizens stand up and demand a change, the governments aren't going to do anything about it. So it's a very exciting moment as New Paradigm Institute, Ubiquity University, the training program, Citizens for Disclosure. I'm here in Washington, right across the street from the Senate office building. So I'm going over there. We're lobbying. We're highlighting the UAP disclosure issue. It's a very, very exciting moment in history.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you for that. Do you still see there being a vital role for future whistleblowers? And do you think we're likely to potentially see any more whistleblowers come forward?
Oh, absolutely. Right after David Grush testified last July 26th to the House Government Oversight National Security Subcommittee, according to estimates, there's upwards of 40 other individuals in the military, in the intelligence community, that want to become whistleblowers. And one of the things that New Paradigm Institute is forming is a whole legal team. I think we have 16 lawyers. They're going to start moving out and protecting the whistleblowers from persecution and attack by those forces, the legacy group forces that still want to keep the information secret so that they can profit from it, either in terms of weapons development or the profitability from the corporations on various ET technologies. They don't want to share. And we've got to compel them to, because this is the global commons. The cosmos belongs to all of humanity. It doesn't belong to the US military and a handful of private corporations. We cannot allow that to happen. So it's essential at this moment, when the cat of disclosure is coming out of the bag, that citizens everywhere, like you are, Vinny, and your disclosure team, should be actively engaged as partners together with New Paradigm and many, many other groups that are working for disclosure. And you just have to go to newparadigminstitute.org, and there's calls to action and all kinds of information that you can avail yourselves to, from our training to other avenues for citizen involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a big proponent for the work that's been happening with New Paradigm and sharing it and helping spread the message. I think it's an absolutely vital role to play, and I'm just happy to be a part of it. So, yeah. I mean, how do you deal with the other side where we get skepticism and a lot of stigma? How do you approach that when it crops up?
Well, what I do, I just say, by the way, do you know that the US government is now on record saying that they exist and that evidence is forthcoming? Most people that I meet, even here in Washington, which is one of the most cynical towns on planet Earth, they say, really? We had no idea. And then the next thing they tell me is, I've had a UFO experience, or my Uncle Tom or my Aunt Minnie, or my friend this, or my something that. So most people, particularly young people that I talk to about it, register excitement. Very few people say, oh, no, that doesn't exist. The earth is really flat, because they know that the earth is round. They know. And in fact, 70% of the American public believes in UFOs. They believe in ETs. So but the problem is that what the CIA did back as early as the 1940s, late 1940s, when they realized, my God, these guys are coming from outer space. We've got to keep this completely secret. They mounted a sustained decades-long campaign that has lasted to now through the media to convince people not only that the UFOs didn't exist, but that you're crazy if you think they do. And it was an extremely successful campaign. But now people are starting to talk about it. It's like the gays coming out of the closet. You know, the UAP disclosure is coming out of the closet. And it's a very exciting moment to be alive, to be engaged in politics, because this is the politics that really matters. You don't have to be against anything. You're for the future. You're for cosmic contact with extraterrestrial intelligences. You have the opportunity to find out the facts, to learn how to communicate with them, because they communicate through mental telepathy. Anybody that knows remote viewing can communicate with an ET. In fact, it's a byproduct. It's an extraordinary thing that these beings seem so distant, but they're as close as our capacity to engage in mental telepathy. It's really extraordinary, really extraordinary.
So how do you navigate the intersection of science and academia, government and government secrecy, and the public interest in the kind of the big picture? It seems like it's all separate kind of segments or entities, but surely there's got to be a way of kind of pulling it all together.
Well, I think right at the beginning, it's going to be very separate but interactive. Let me give you an example. Okay. One of the big challenges is going to be how the major world religions take this in. And so we're in the process of working with Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and Taoists, and indigenous groups to bring scholars and religious leaders together to talk about the implications of extraterrestrials. We're in the process of developing a project whereby scholars in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam in the West, and Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism in the East will go back into their traditions and begin to collate all the stories, all the myths, all the legends about extraterrestrial contact back in the beginning of days. Because if the world religions, which have existed for thousands of years, can remember that they've believed in ETs all along, right? It's going to make it easier for contemporary theologians and spiritual leaders to accept the ET moment. Now, on the other hand, in academia, which is locked into the logical, positivistic, scientific, materialist, reductionist view of the world, that if it isn't in time, space, and causality, and if you can't measure it with my slide ruler, it isn't real. You have to concentrate on hard evidence, which is plentiful, that alien craft are here, retrieved, available once we get the government to disclose. And similarly with extraterrestrial biological entities. So the scientific world will want to know the hard facts about the alien beings. They won't be so interested in the metaphysics of the primordial marvels that the ancients saw in the sky. But it's interesting, Vinny. Virtually every major religious tradition has humanity created by somebody else. So right at the origin of our creation myths, we didn't come out of nature just spontaneously like the apes. The world was, it was created by a higher intelligence. And those are the ETs. In some ways, the ETs are just another name for God, in the sense of we experience them as divine. And let me just say a word about this. When someone in Borneo living in a Stone Age culture, if he or she finds a cell phone, they would consider it a miracle that they could push a button and talk to somebody 15 miles away, right? They would consider that a miracle. For us living in Washington and wherever you live, in London or wherever, iPhones are not a miracle, but ETs are, right? So that's worth just noting in passing, that we are to the ETs what an Aboriginal living in a Stone Age world is to modern technology. And if we can humble ourselves enough to take that in, we will be well served as we begin this multi-sectoral process. For example, since I'm in academia, education, the implications of extraterrestrials for education is that little kids need to be taught that we are not alone, that there's all kinds of ETs out there. So one of the most exciting things for education is to begin to teach what I call the mother tongue. We shouldn't be teaching little kids Latin and Greek and, a foreign language, Arabic. We should be teaching them interspecies communication, because the data shows that if you can communicate with your pets, if you can communicate with a tree, if you can communicate with an animal, a dolphin, you can communicate with ETs. And so imagine an educational system that is taking kids out to nature to sit down in front of a tree and to communicate with trees, because we know that trees, just like animals, are intelligent, conscious, sentient, compassionate. Trees cry. Plants weep when another plant has their leaf cut off. Elephants mourn when their babies are killed. So all the capacities that we humans have, every other sentient being has, but in a different way, given the different ways that life form has been shaped by the evolutionary order. So as we go into our ET moment, we're going to start activating faculties we used to have. That Aboriginal doesn't need a cell phone to communicate mentally, telepathically to his partner 15 miles away while they're on the hunt. Aboriginals remember remote viewing. They do it all the time. So when they discover an iPhone, it seems miraculous, but the actual fact is it's redundant. They actually don't need it, right? So there's all kinds of layers and complexities that we will be exploring as different societal sectors begin to work out the implications. But at the center, which unites it all together, is that in order for humanity to survive its ET moment, we have to radically transform human identity from perpetual war, conflict, and destruction into how can I love you? How can Jim and Vinny and all their friends come together in the spirit of radical collaboration where you vow, do no harm? And how can we then work together to revitalize and regenerate the larger planetary ecology so humanity can really take its place as an ambassador of planet Earth to the larger cosmic intelligences and civilizations that have been visiting and observing us for some time and very quietly whispering in our ears, stop killing. Get it together, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one thing that's been talked about and is this kind of war between Russia, China, and the US about whoever's going to get this technology first is going to kind of rule the world. But I mean, that's looking at it from this weaponization point of view. But I mean, I think a lot of people are quite aware that this free energy could really help transform humanity in the favor. But even in a post-disclosure world, surely that would take time to implement globally. I mean, do you think that's right?
I think you've just asked what, in my opinion, is the $64,000 question. Thank you. By all accounts, the extraterrestrials are using technologies that could solve every problem that humanity has and do so very quickly. It's very interesting. If you go back to Tesla, this very eccentric inventor and scientist in the United States back in the early 20th century, he came up with free energy and 0-point energy, where he said, you can take electricity out of space. You don't need a big power plant. You just need a kind of a little box with a certain algorithm that he produced pre-computer.
Yeah.
And you can take energy right out of the air. Why? Because he understood what the extraterrestrials understood and what physicists are just now beginning to understand, that space is not empty. It's invisible to the naked eye, but it is completely full, jam-packed with information and energy. Okay? Not only Tesla, but a whole series of inventors and scientists in Europe and in Russia and in China and the US have all been intuiting this for over 100 years. And I would recommend to everybody watching this program, there's a documentary you can see on Netflix called The Lost Century, that's produced by the Disclosure Project. And in one documentary, you can see everything that's available and everything that's been repressed. Because right at the moment that Tesla was coming up with 0-point energy, John Rockefeller was coming up with oil. And the fossil fuel industry, in an alignment with the military and the intelligence and the governments, completely destroyed Tesla. And they've completely destroyed anybody and everybody in the last 100 years that has been saying free energy exists. And we know from the alien craft that's what they use. And that's how they can come from Alpha Centauri to planet Earth in a nanosecond. Because if you understand that space is full of information, you can do 3D printing. That's one reason why their alien craft are so hard to figure out, because we come to the, anything we build, first you've got to cut down a tree, and then you've got to saw it up, and then you got to build a table or build a chair, or if you want energy, you got to get the coal out. We got factories. Everything in human civilization that we build, we rip up the planet, we destroy nature, we burn it, melt it, saw it up, and then we build this computer, right? Through which I'm talking to you. The ETs don't do that. They figured out what Tesla figured out. Not only can you get unlimited energy out of empty space, you can create anything you want. So the spacecraft are 3D, let's call it 3D printing, right? If you know the algorithms and you know the equations, you don't have to destroy nature. You can synergize with nature, and nature will miraculously manifest a spacecraft that can travel through time and space in an instant. The only barrier is your intelligence, your knowledge, right? So, and that's one aspect. Another aspect is gravity. The extraterrestrials have figured out gravity. Right now, we have gravity, and to break up gravity, we build these big rockets, and we have like thousands of tons of fuel, and we light the firecracker, and it goes, and it goes in the outer space. Then the booster rocket. That is so primitive. That is so primitive. The ETs have figured out that rather than busting through gravity, because you're stronger than gravity. I mean, it's just one big phallic symbol, masculine phallic symbol, these rockets. What you need to do is trim tab with gravity, be feminine with gravity, and you can use gravity as a propulsion system. That's what they do. They use gravity as a propulsion system. So all this is just sitting there. And if we'd have gone with Tesla and all the people in the 1920s and so forth and so on, every person on Earth right now would have a little box about as big as my iPhone sitting in the corner. You flip it on and your lights go on, and everything that you need, your energy. There's cars that have been demonstrated, in France, for example, 30 years ago that could drive on water. You don't need oil, but the oil companies want you to buy oil because they want to make profits. And they are so determined to make a profit that they're willing to destroy the earth before they're going to let go, unless and until the citizens of the world rise up and demand that they stop. So your question is, so I say it's a $64,000 question because it's ultimately, everybody, this isn't about Jim or Vinny or you talking to ETs and let's have a nice day. This is about using the technology that they are bringing for the benefit of all of humanity. Nobody needs to starve. All the famines are all man-made. Nobody needs to go without and be impoverished. We have all that we need, but we have these elites repressing us for profit and power. And we now teeter on the brink of self-destruction. And it's extraordinary synchronicity to me that right at the moment when we're literally teetering and we're going off the cliff, the ETs show up with everything that we need.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I still see, unfortunately, across social media is a lot of people blanket statement of we're not ready. Humanity is not ready, which I completely disagree with. What message would you send to those kind of people?
My God, we are so ready. We are so ready. And may I quote JC Superstar, man. Jesus said 2,000 years ago that it is the truth that sets you free. I know of very few examples in history where when people were told the truth, they freaked out and it all just crumbled down. In our personal relationships, what is the most corrosive? It's when you lie.
Yeah.
When you deceive. For two reasons. Number one, you're manipulating the other person's reality. And number two, unconsciously, they already know what the truth is. And so when you just tell the truth, and it's really hard, because we're in a culture of deception at every level. But when you just tell the truth to people, I find in my personal relationships and in my political relationships, people relax, people know where they are, and it's like one big relief. Whew, okay, let's now get on with it. All the people that are saying everybody's going to freak out, they have some hidden agenda, I guarantee you, for why they don't want the public to know the information. And I just don't agree with that thesis. For democracy to work, you need transparency.
Yeah.
At every level. Now, there may be some things like the equations for a nuclear weapon, but we shouldn't have nuclear weapons either.
Mm.
Come on, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you saying that, because it is, I agree with you completely. And it's quite disheartening to see, quite a few people still sort of giving that message, which is, very negative. So I really do appreciate that. And well, listen, Jim, it's been an absolute honor. Before I let you go, do you have any kind of parting words that you'd like to kind of leave for the audience, if you don't mind?
Let me say this. What I'm coming to realize in my own heart and mind as I delve into helping to facilitate humanity's ET moment, is I've completely reevaluated my understanding of why humanity's here. I never really knew why humanity was here. I thought about it a lot, but when I've entered the ET domain, I'm finally realizing the purpose for which Gaia, Mother Earth, evolved life over 4.5 billion years to produce us. Think about it. As we enter our ET moment, Mother Earth needs a species that can go off the planet, that can engage in space travel. The elephants can't do it. The dolphins can't do it. They're more intelligent than we are in many ways. But Earth needed a species that had a opposable thumb, had enormous creative intelligence and emotional resilience that can adapt to almost every environment. We are the only species that can adapt to every environment on planet Earth. We're here for a reason. And I think with humanity entering its ET moment, we're going to come into a collective realization as a species that our purpose is to synergize with each other, synergize with the larger planetary ecology, and become diplomats and ambassadors for planet Earth and represent her in the larger extraterrestrial civilizational domain or matrix within which we're going to soon find ourselves. We're not going to make it as individuals out there, even as individual countries. We're only going to be able to make it in the cosmic scheme of things as a species representing a planet which is part of a solar system that has its rightful place in cosmic life. So for me, I'm feeling for the first time, Vinny, a purpose for why we were created, why I'm here, and the preciousness of this moment, which will never happen again, as humanity looks up and embraces the cosmos for the first time. Very exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that wonderful message. I really appreciate it. And for being here. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And I'm sure everyone that's watching this, who I appreciate being here to support both myself and the work that you're doing, I'm sure that they have enjoyed it too. So thank you so much, Jim.
Let's be in touch.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.